Okay, so welcome to the WVU-COM MOOC. My name is Dr. Nick Bowman. I'm a professor in the Department of Communication Studies here in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I'm happy to talk to you with this week about CMC, that is computer-mediated communication. And it's part of my week-long series of discussions on this notion of our robot overlords. And it's how we sometimes talk about technology as this personless sort of thing taking over our lives. And one of the things I want to introduce you to is the notion that yes, we do live in a technology society, and we have information technologies around us, and we use them often. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, technology itself is really not bad or good. It's really a tool to accomplish any number of goals. So for my discussion, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about what those tools are, how they affect us, and some of the ways we can understand conceptually what it means to have communication technology. So with that in mind, the very first day of my discussion, today is going to be February 4th, 2013, for those keeping track, I'm going to talk about the definition of CMC, that is computer-mediated communication. And I don't know if you've seen this cartoon before, and if you click on the cartoon, it will take you to a Wikipedia page about this. But back in 1993, Peter Steiner drew this great cartoon on the internet, Nobody Knows You're a Dog. And it got a lot of play. In fact, some people estimate that he's probably made about 50 grand in royalties off this cartoon being distributed. A lot of scholars and technologists and social media experts and really a lot of folks who use technology tend to frame this one, put it on their wall, and kind of laugh about it. And I want you to look at it, and maybe in our discussion boards or our Twitter page when we talk live about some of our discussion bits, I want to hear what you think about this. But to me, what it shows is that when we communicate through technology, we have an interesting level of control over what gets communicated. You know, we can just share our words, and by doing that, we might be able to hide ourselves. And that scared a lot of people early on. And it's sort of what gave rise to this notion of these robot computers taking us over, that we could all go online, and we can lie about ourselves, and we can hide the fact that we're just a bunch of dogs. So I'm going to challenge that, and I'm going to challenge you to challenge that as we go through not only my week, but the 4 weeks of this massive open online course. And come back to Steiner's comments, because of course they were in 1993, and it was a tongue-in-cheek joke, but a lot of folks are still pretty afraid of technology. And one of the things I'll submit to you is that we live in a technology age where we have to start learning the pros and cons of technology, and we can't do that unless we define what we're talking about and start to apply it to different areas. And so a big part of this MOOC, indeed, is trying to get that layer of understanding out to anybody interested in hearing about it. So let's go ahead and start. Today we're going to talk about CMC. We're going to define what it means to have computer-mediated communication, and we're going to go backwards talking about communication, the mediation, and the computers. Once we've got that definition out there, and admittedly it's going to seem kind of simplistic, but it's important to understand that without these definitions, it makes it quite difficult for us to really explore the phenomenon. So I want you to make sure that you pull away the core conceptual notions of these things. And we'll talk about those again through the Twitter feeds and through the discussion boards throughout the MOOC and beyond. And then I'll talk a little bit about why this might matter as we go through the rest of the week and the rest of the month and the rest of your lives with technology. So communication, when we say communication, we're talking about this notion of stimulating meaning in the mind of others, that we have something inside of us that we need to get out and share with other people. And we do that for any number of reasons. We'll talk about it in a minute. But think about the definition for a minute. Think about the notion of stimulating meaning in the mind of another. What that means is I have to do something to get you to feel how I want you to feel. Right? If I say hello to you, I'm saying it because I want to get your attention, because I want to say hi to you, because I want you to feel like you are accepted in my worldview or in that one discussion. If I'm trying to date somebody, I'm going to say, will you go out with me? And I have to communicate that message in such a way that they're going to get the impression that I want to go out with them. And of course, I want them to say yes. So I'm going to say it in a certain, way, a nice way, a pro-social way. I might have my hands out, things of this nature. Now, those examples are not that important for our discussion. What is important, well, there are 3 things that I can pull from McCroskey and Richmond's definition, this notion of stimulating meaning in the mind of others. It's a process. Communication doesn't happen once. It's an ongoing process. It has many moving parts. There's a lot of links between those parts. And those different parts work or don't work at different times. And again, throughout this MOOC and throughout my discussions, I'll be showing you different communication models that try to model the relatively complex process of communication. It's both verbal and nonverbal. Most of us generally accept the fact that when we communicate, we don't just use our voice. In fact, if you study the history of human communication, you'll find out that we didn't develop speech and language for quite a while, that the majority of early man's communication, early species communication, was largely through noises and hand motions and the use of different signs and symbols in the sand and things like this. It took us quite a while to develop both physiologically and socially into a species that could use voice communication. And again, that's a bit beyond our discussions, but keep in mind it has both of these elements. The important one, the one bolded in red, red being the important color, it's goal-driven. When we communicate, we have a reason for it. We're going somewhere with this. We want you to do something. We want to share information or get information. We want to share our relationships. We want to form relationships. We want to persuade people. We want to learn about different messages to be persuaded. And finally, we communicate as part of our leisure sphere, part of our leisure environment. And we'll talk about those things later. So communication is that goal-driven process of sharing meaning in the mind of another, stimulating meaning in the mind of another. Mediation. Well, mediation is any vessel that can contain a message. For folks who watch the show Medium, a ghost is an example of a medium. It's a vessel that transports information from the dead to the living. And that message goes through a medium, because we can't talk to the dead, but we can talk to the ghost who can talk to the dead and get the message back for us. So a medium is that vessel. And I put vessel in quotations because just like our ghost example, vessels don't have to physically exist. My voice right now is a vessel by which you're receiving my messages. I can also send you an email, or I can write you a letter, or I can put it on television. So any vessel that can contain the message would be a medium. And for us, we're going to use the word channel. So mediums and channels are going to be interchangeable. Why is that important? Let's look at this communication model. This is in fact what's called the Shannon-Weaver model of communication. It was written in 1948 by electrical engineers trying to explain the communication process. And what they were literally trying to map out was the telephone system. How can a telephone system actually receive, encode, relay information to another telephone that could decode the information, decoding being from those electrical signals to a human voice, and get it to a person? Well, we study the channel. We're studying that thing that holds the communication message. So it's very important to understand that mediation is that channel. It's I'm saying something to you through this PowerPoint presentation. That would be the medium. That would be the channel. Finally, the computer. Now, we're not talking about computers in terms of computational devices. We're talking about digital technologies. We're talking about technologies that in our definition are designed to share information. The cellular phone being an example. Okay, and I'm going to go back to that word digital in a moment. But for us, computer is a technology. It is it was a computing component, a cell phone, a computer, a tablet, a laptop, any of those devices you use to send information. Okay? Technology is a tool. This is a really important concept right here that often gets lost in the process. Our technologies are tools that we use to achieve different goals. Why do I have a cell phone in my pocket? It helps me achieve the goal of getting in touch with people when I need to, and it helps me achieve the goal of being accessible when I want to be accessed, that I'm on the road. So if I don't want someone to call me when I'm at work, I don't bring my cell phone with me. If I want to be able to call a girlfriend or a wife or a child on the road, I give them a cell phone. So computers in our sense are those tools that we use to achieve different communication goals. Goals of information, goals of relationships, goals of persuasion, and goals of entertainment. Now I highlight digital here because that's really important, because digital, for our purposes, is information that's not restricted to space or time. right? Because the newspaper is a technology. A newspaper would be a technology wherein a company writes stories to tell you about things happening in the world. They hand you the piece of paper. The piece of paper is the medium, and they have some way of getting that to you. And then, of course, there's a message in there. There's a communication in there. But what happens with those particular mediums and those technologies is that you have to go buy the paper. You've got to hold the paper. The paper can't change. So if they write a story at 9 a.m. and something happens at 9:30 a.m., the paper can't change. If I write somebody a letter and then I change my mind, it's hard to go back and get that letter. Well, one of the things about digital technology is that it doesn't really physically exist. It exists in a network of information. It exists in ways in which I can access the information on demand no matter where I'm at, and usually no matter what time it is. So I can go to someone's Facebook page that maybe I want to date, and I can look at their Facebook page 24 hours a day, 7 days a week based on their privacy settings. And an example of that here is look at this world map. This is actually a map of the internet. And if you were to click on this, it will take you to a higher resolution image. These different phones here allow me to talk to these people at any time. I can share information with them at any time so long as they answer their phone as well. In fact, I spend a lot of time overseas in Europe doing research and teaching, and I stay in touch with those folks all the time. And you see the cables there are quite strong. It's easy for me to stay in touch with my European friends. It's a little harder to stay in touch with my friends from South America because the connections aren't as strong. They're not as there. But the point I'm making is that when I say computer, I'm talking about those digital technologies that allow for communication to happen. How does that work? Well, what we're saying, and to put this all together into CMC, CMC is the sharing of information through digital technology. Okay? We conceptualize communication technologies as tools for sharing. The internet, blogs, social media, cellular phones, tablets, all of these technologies are digital, they're based on networked principles, and their chief design or their chief usage is to allow us to share things. And of course, all tools aren't equal. Just like our lobster man has claws and could murder anybody with these claws, he could also use an axe or a mace or a sword because different types of weapons might result in different actions that he might or might not want that time. One of the things that people often forget is they treat all tools the same. But anybody who's ever built a doghouse before knows that a hammer is really great for nails. It's not very great for screws. And so one of the things you'll think about often is if we reconceptualize this stuff as tools for sharing information, digital tools for sharing information, we can start to analyze both what CMC is at the top level, and we can also think a little bit about the different tools being better or worse for different types of sharing. And in weeks 2, 3, and 4, our professors will go into much more detail about tools for love, tools for bullying, tools for work capacity and increasing productivity, and all sorts of different usages here. So let's use an example. Okay, we've got a romantic relationship here. And what's happening right now is she's breaking up with him. She's going to say, it's not you, it's me. And she's going to throw her heart in the trash, right? This is not happening anymore. And she's got to break this off for reasons that we're not quite sure, but it's not our business, is it? She is the sender of the communication. He's the receiver, and the message is, it's not you, it's me. And in this case, the channel is verbal, and probably some nonverbals as well. She might use hand motions to dismiss him, throwing her heart in the trash, things of that nature. Okay. What happens when you add a cell phone to the mix? And let's say that rather than saying to him in person, it's not you, it's me, she were to text him, it's not you, it's me. Now, when I pose this question to my undergraduate students here in Morgantown, they have this very intense negative reaction. How dare you break up with somebody on a text message? And I often wonder why that is, or rather, I know why, but it's curious to me because the message didn't change. It's not you, it's me. The sender didn't change. She's who she is. She has the same emotions, same background. The receiver didn't change. It's still him. The only thing that changes is the channel. And so one of the things I might push everyone here to do on our discussions later is tell me, why does it matter? Why should it matter? Okay, it's something I want you to think about, because most of us agree that it does. For example, folks suggest the text message is very impersonal. It suggests she doesn't care very much. It perhaps cuts him off and doesn't give him a chance to respond back. It doesn't let her see the consequences of her message, because he, if she were to see him actually be upset, maybe she wouldn't say it's not you, it's me. Maybe she really doesn't mean it. At the same time, from an efficiency standpoint, her goal is to break up with him. And the phone text message, what a great tool to do that. She can send him a text, never have to see him again, never see his reaction, and therefore she won't change her reaction. So it's tough, because from like an efficiency goal, if the goal is to break up, the phone's probably perfect. But if the goal is to maintain a relationship or maintain a friendship, for example, the phone is probably going to communicate a lack of respect on her part for him. And that's just one of thousands of potential interpretations, and I'd be very curious to hear how you think about all of this stuff. Why does it matter? Well, we had our discussion just a second ago, right? That we sometimes will blow off CMC and go, okay, it's just communication through technology. And yet, in the situation that was just mentioned, the simple act of a text breakup versus a face-to-face breakup seems to have consequences. People get fired up about it. People respond differently. We see the channel of communication actually changing the communication process. And look where the channel is. It's right smack in the middle. This is a reconceptualization of Shannon and Weaver. And the channel is the thing that carries the message. So it might be argued that if you change the channel, you're changing the message. So in an environment today where we communicate so heavily through digital technology, through communication technology, are we paying attention to the fact that our channel choices could have drastic impact on how our messages are encoded, decoded, and eventually understood by the person that's supposed to get them? So to wrap up this discussion and to shift it over to our live discussions, I want to focus on 4 concepts down here that might talk about why CMC matters. The first one's entropy. Entropy is when you see a message sort of shrinking or losing tact over time. So if you've ever played the telephone game, you might see a situation where I tell Sally, I love green chicken, and Sally tells somebody something else, and before you know it, the message goes all the way down to, Dr. Bowman has diseased chickens in his office, because things change along the way. We know this happens in everyday life. We know if people who study the Bible have found that some of the biblical stories we read today have changed quite drastically from the stories as they were originally written and possibly as they were told beforehand. So one question might be, do different channels fight this better than others? Probably that's the case. And one of the questions I might ask is, sure, I would guess that as some channels are more permanent than others. In other words, you can post something on Facebook and the message stays longer, whereas on Twitter it might go away faster. But I wonder, do we always want to fight this? If I mess something up, and let's say I send an angry message to my boss, I might rather that go on Twitter where it's going to disappear than go on Facebook and stay on my wall forever. So let's think about how our different channels might fight this message destruction better than others. And if we want that to happen, I don't know if we want all of our communication to be permanent. So let's think about that. Do different channels increase redundancy? So one of the things we study in physical networks is that the more redundancy you have, the greater chance you have of getting the message across. So in a telephone line, if you only have one connection between phone A and B, and that connection breaks, you lose the phone connection. But if you have 6 connections between A and B, and one breaks, you still have 5 more to use. So you might think about ways that we can use communication technology, digital technology, to increase redundancy, right? We might think about, well, if I send you an email and I call you, and I meet you face to face, and I pin a heart on your Pinterest wall, you might really get the point that I love you. Of course, we also know that our choice of channel can possibly affect the message. So you might wonder that while you're creating redundancy in communication, I'm telling you 4 things. If the medium changes the message, are those 4 messages exactly the same? And should they be? And maybe there's a strategy to saying things a different way. And so you might think about that as we go on to our online discussions via Twitter and via the discussion boards. How might the medium itself be a message? And is that redundancy that we want or that we don't want? In other words, is that something that, do we want to say the same thing 4 ways or to say something 4 different ways? And we can play with that a little bit. So let's talk on that. Do different channels remove noise or introduce noise? And so I might argue that, one of the big benefits, for example, of typing something is that if I type something, you can read it the same way I typed it. But oftentimes, it might introduce other kinds of noise. What about social noise? What about the fact that we're typing and putting up so much information that we're losing all of the information? That could be a new type of noise. Or you might think, for example, I type a sarcastic joke on your Facebook wall, and you get the text word for word, but you don't get the intention because you can't talk to me. So let's think about how our different channel choices might influence the noise that comes with the equation. Noise being that thing that can disrupt the message. So you can imagine a cellular phone conversation where the signal is bad and therefore I can't hear you very well. There's also psychological noise. I'm in a bad mood, so you're talking to me and I'm processing your information differently. Okay, so let's think about how channels might affect noise. Finally, do channels vary in their capacity for communication? So probably the most apparent and least understood part of social media, and you can read my comments here as well, they share more or less information. We have these social cues, right? If this was a video conversation right now, you would see my hands moving as I talk, which, by the way, they are right now. You'd see my facial expression. You'd see me leaning towards the camera and away from the camera, and you'd be able to get a sense of my engagement in the conversation as well. Right now, of course, you only have my voice. And it can fluctuate. It can go faster or slower. Faster as I get excited about a topic, slower as I emphasize a point. And we might think about these different cues. In fact, Dr. Westerman in week 2 will talk quite a bit about how these cues might or might not influence how we form relationships, for example. We might think of different communication channels as being rich or lean in cues. Video having verbals and nonverbals, audio having verbal only. And of course, you might think about whether or not that's always good or bad. So again, that notion of choosing the channel to meet the goal and understanding the cues. That it's not that we always want more cues. It's that some have more cues and they might be able to help us. And why does it matter? Well, we finally get in this discussion, and this is to close up our discussion for today. Which one's better? Is it better to break up with somebody face-to-face? Or is it better to break up with somebody via text message? And I suppose the answer to that lies in your goal. If I want to cut somebody off, why would I go find them? Why would I go find them in person and hold their hand? And I often joke with my undergrads that a breakup takes a weekend, right? But today, a breakup can be a text message. For folks on the job market, one of my favorite aspects of job searching is it's always the case that a company tends to email you when they're not going to hire you. Sorry, your application is not being considered at this time. But it's interesting how they will call you when they do want to talk to you. Because we like delivering good news. And when I deliver good news, I want to see you respond to it. But it's like we don't really like delivering bad news. So I want you guys to go online, talk to me, and talk to each other about which is better. And define better for me. What does it mean to say something's better? To me, better means accomplishes my goal. Which is the point of today, is those computer-mediated communication technologies satisfy different goals for seeking information, for forming relationships, for persuading others, and for helping us relax and engage in leisure activity. So to wrap things up here, I want to keep this at about 25 minutes total. Let's chat more. I want you to go into the community, share your answers to some of the questions I just proposed. Bring your own questions and commentary. You can tweet me at Bowman Spartan using the WVU CommMOOC hashtag. You can go on the discussion forums that will be available for you during all the days where we talk about this stuff. And then finally, don't forget that we're going to be talking tomorrow. So I'm going to have discussions tomorrow on We Are All Media. And tomorrow I'm going to talk a lot more about our collective role in CMC and this notion that in today's media sphere, in today's information society, not only are we no longer isolated from each other, and we certainly communicate at a degree that's much greater, much more rapid, and much more consistent than ever before, we're also the sources of information. And I'm going to talk about how we can understand that duality between being of the network and being part of the network, and finally, being an information source as we go through this information society. So let's talk later on today. I'll catch you online, and hopefully I'll see you back here tomorrow for a discussion We Are All Media.